Hello, I'm Ashley Hefner, Advanced Planning Manager for the City of Culver City. Culver City is in the process of updating its general plan, which will help guide how our city government makes decisions and serves residents over the next 25 years. The general plan covers topics we all care deeply about, including housing, the economy, climate adaptation and resiliency, health and equity, transportation, arts and culture, parks and recreation, urban design, and so much more. I'm pleased to introduce a new video series where our team of expert consultants will share key findings from their research on existing conditions in Culver City. The city will use their insights and feedback from the community to shape policies in the updated general plan. A mini survey accompanies each video for you to share your thoughts on the content presented in the videos. We need to hear from you to create a general plan for Culver City that's driven by our community values. So please share the videos and surveys with others. This is a challenging time, and we thank you for your continued interest in the general plan update. Community engagement related to the general plan update will continue. For the time being, it will transition to an online format through methods such as these informational videos and surveys to gather input. Thank you, and please enjoy the video.
Hello, my name is Amitav Barthakar. I'm a partner with HR and Advisors. We're an economic development consulting firm based in Los Angeles, but also located nationally, and we are part of the larger general plan update team that is helping the city of Culver City in going through the update of its current general plan. So today's presentation covers a few key issues related to the city's economy and demographics in terms of existing conditions, historic trends, and potential implications for the future. The presentation, which is going to be fairly quick, is broken into three parts. First is an overview of demographic and socioeconomic characteristics of the city. Then an overview of the real estate market and its trends. And finally, a quick discussion on key economic development considerations as it relates to the general plan. Before I start, I also want to qualify that this research was completed in 2019, and a lot of the information is based on the last full year data available, which in many cases is 2018 or even 2017. But more importantly, this is all done prior to our current economic condition that has taken hold as a result of COVID-19. But I would emphasize that while there are a number of uncertainties, we should consider this in light of long-term, sort of a 25-year planning horizon for the city. So first, going into demographic and socioeconomic conditions. The population and number of households in Culver City has been very stable for the past 2 decades. As of 2019, the city's population is approximately 40,000 in about 17,700 housing units. Both of these measures have increased by just 3.5% since the year 2000, which is a very, very minuscule change in overall population. While Culver City is diverse, its racial and ethnic makeup is different from the county. Culver City is 50% white compared to the county, which is about 28% white. The share of Hispanic population in Culver City is 24% compared to 49% in the county. Culver City has a slightly higher share of Asian and African American population compared to the county. And while the share of Hispanic population in the city has remained constant since 2000, the share of white and Asian population has increased slightly, while the share of African American population has decreased slightly. So these are important trends, although they're marginal, they're important trends to note because the needs of the city will keep changing based on these racial and demographic changes. During the same period, job growth in Culver City has been unprecedented. Culver City has over 60,000 jobs, but more importantly, this reflects a 45% increase in jobs since 2002. This is largely driven by the creative media and technology industries, but it also includes service jobs like retail. So this is a complicated figure, but this figure shows a distribution of Culver City's economic base with job growth since 2002 along the bottom axis and concentration of jobs relative to the county, or what we call a location quotient, along the vertical axis. And finally, the size of the circle represents the number of jobs in that particular sector. So if you are on the top right side of this graph, you're a high growth, high concentration sector, meaning there's a higher share of jobs in this sector compared to the county. Clearly, Culver City's growth has been driven by high wage information and professional service jobs. Of the 13,000 plus jobs added since 2010, as the slide shows, 38% are in the professional service category. The city also has a lot of jobs in retail, accommodation, food services, and these will need particular attention in the near term given the economic conditions. However, in contrast, new housing growth in the city has not kept pace. As you know, population growth, as I showed in the first slide, was very minuscule. This is even more apparent right now when you compare it to relative to job growth. This table shows relative growth in jobs and housing units in Culver City and its peer cities in the region. Between 2002 and 2017, Culver City has added 1 housing unit for every 49 jobs. This is one of the lowest housing production rates among the cities shown here. Regionally, comparison, LA County as a whole has added 1 housing unit for about 2.5 jobs. So while the city has more units that have come online or are in the pipeline, the imbalance is still very, very large. This imbalance, as you may have heard from others too, is often the root of some of the issues like traffic, resulting from workers in Culver City having to drive from surrounding areas every day. So this is an important metric to keep in mind. At the same time, the city's share of higher income households has increased and lower income households has declined. So while we're not adding housing units, the people living in the existing housing units have been changing, right? The scarcity of housing makes it an expensive place, and only households earning above a certain level can afford to live here. That speaks for Culver City's desirability and quality of life, but also speaks for issues like affordability. But also household income distribution in the city is not even and varies by race and ethnicity. While the 2017 median household income in Culver City was about $87,000, which is more than 40% higher than the countywide median, Hispanic households' median income in the city was about $62,000, which is significantly lower than the citywide median. The scarcity of housing and rising costs can put lower income renters at risk of displacement. 56% of renters in Culver City are people of color. Although the share of severely overburdened renters in the city at 21% is lower than the county or statewide levels, this is a metric that the city should try to push down consistently. We conducted a very high level displacement risk analysis in the city by neighborhood. And as is shown in the map here, not all areas of the city face the same challenges. There are a few areas that show high risk for renter displacement. That is, they have a high share of severely rent burdened households, as well as a larger share of lower income households. These include West Washington, Sunkist Park, Washington Culver, and the McLaughlin neighborhoods. So in terms of fiscal revenues and fiscal health, which is, how is the city government and tax base doing? Although Culver City's resources are fairly diversified, its single largest source of general fund revenue is sales and use tax, essentially driven by retail businesses. When general fund revenues are compared to other West Side cities on a per equivalent dwelling unit or EDU basis, Equivalent dwelling unit basically combines jobs and households in the city into a single measure. We see that, this is for the purpose of apples to apples comparison. We see that Culver City's revenues are comparable to West Hollywood, but significantly lower than Santa Monica or Beverly Hills. Of course, this is all pre-COVID data. We think fiscal health will be a key consideration in post-COVID recovery. I think important things to note are that sales tax revenues have grown in the city, but they rely heavily on general merchandise, which is, your big box store, your shopping mall, and some of your community serving retail. And this could erode over time because you draw a lot of shoppers from outside of Culver City. Relative to your peers and concentration of employment, Culver City collects a smaller amount of hotel taxes or transit occupancy taxes. That's an opportunity. In comparison to Culver City's peers, property tax makes a relatively small contribution. New development would change this, but within limitations of Prop 13. The city's expenditures are relatively on par with its peers on a per equivalent dwelling unit basis, and the city receives a pretty high quality of service. And finally, one thing to note is that Culver City has a significant unfunded pension liability, almost $700 million. Now, moving on to the real estate market and real estate market trends. In the next few slides, I want to give you a snapshot of Culver City's various real estate market sectors. When we look at the real estate market in the city, we look at it in comparison with the larger competitive market area, or CMA, as shown in the map. The larger yellow boundary is the competitive, and the red boundary is the city of Culver City. The first slide is about the office market. Culver City's central location, transit connectivity, and a critical mass of well-known employers have really made it a prime location for Class A office space. Growth in tech and media has provoked demand for non-conventional employment spaces like sound stages and production studios, as well as a spate of new development. And as you've seen in the Hayden tract, industrial or older flex type buildings are seeing market pressure to convert to more profitable office uses. There's a significant demand for new office space with an estimated 1.5 million square feet in the pipeline. Class A office rents in Culver City has exceeded the competitive market area in recent years. And as you could see, the competitive market area includes all prime, high-performing West LA markets. And increasing price pressure in areas like Santa Monica and Playa Vista are really pushing tech and media companies to look at Culver City as an affordable alternative, as a relatively affordable alternative, but still with access to the same labor force and amenities. While employment has grown considerably, this is again a repeat of what we've shown before, housing stock has barely increased in the last 20 years, constraining the market. Rent and for sale prices are increasing very rapidly, and housing affordability is certainly threatened. Despite a recent uptick in development and some planned projects, the city's height restrictions limit density, and that actually is a barrier to financial feasibility for some of the higher density projects, even higher quality projects that may actually want to locate in Culver City. This graph shows various submarkets in the competitive market area and their volume of multifamily developments during the 2010-2018 period. And clearly, Culver City is the lowest. Recent job growth and pent-up demand for housing suggests an enormous potential for multifamily rental development. There's a lot of pent-up demand, which the market would like to deliver if the opportunity exists, if the sites are found, and if the regulations are favorable. So Culver City has a significant concentration of retail assets. As I mentioned, you have a number of big box stores, Costco, Target, you have the mall, you have a very successful downtown, a lot of eating and drinking establishments. Overall rents, though, in Culver City has lagged behind the competitive market area. and other competitive shopping nodes, but vacancies have remained low. I think rents are, when you compare it to the competitive market area, are lower because your competitive market area includes some of the really high-end, high street retail shopping areas like Rodeo Drive, or areas within Santa Monica and other parts of Beverly Hills and West Hollywood. So that skews rents a little bit. But your market is strong and has been able to succeed given the offer that you have. And again, as I had mentioned earlier, retail sales are predominantly generated by general merchandise in big box and community serving retail centers, the mall, etc. And but I think one of the important things to note is that this competitiveness may erode as more retail gets delivered in your other traditionally underserved adjacent submarkets, particularly new retail coming up in Inglewood, South LA, which is a significant market for Culver City, could erode over time. So successful retail at the new platform project suggests that there is demand for what we call experiential retail. This is retail integrated with open space, dining, and other activities, which is very different from just going to a shopping center. So there may be an opportunity of rethinking the retail positioning in Culver City and how you can maintain your competitive edge. Culver City's hotel market is strong, but relatively underdeveloped. Demand is primarily from business travel, as you can imagine, just by the job growth. And in the future, it will be fueled by employment growth. Most of Culver City's existing hotel stock is older, while recent construction is upscale to compete with the really hot West Side hotel markets. Again, this is all pre-COVID. We think COVID is going to temper demand for hotel rooms, at least in the near term. But given the scale of employment, concentration and future employment growth, there is going to be still room for hotel rooms in the future. Occupancy rates and room rates in Culver City are at all-time highs. However, the city's average daily rates are still way lower than the competitive market areas. We think with strong employment base and regional access to the airport, other economic centers, transit connectivity, the hotel market has a lot of space to grow. So finally, coming down to the economic development considerations that you as stakeholders in the city should be thinking of when trying to think of a long-term growth strategy like the general plan. So I want to highlight a few considerations and basically think about how does all of these trends translate into opportunities or challenges for the city. There may be 4 key areas to think about from an economic perspective. First, Culver City has successfully grown a vibrant economy with its creative industries, and to think of how to retain it, maybe diversify it a little bit, and build on it to attract and support other businesses like retail and hospitality that create opportunities for all, not just a select few qualified media professionals. Second, to deal with the issue of jobs housing imbalance. This is critical. You may have heard it from others as well. Third is to think of Culver City's tax base and fiscal sustainability, how to shore up our resources if retail sales erode over time. And last but not the least, how to think of a recovery from the pandemic and the ensuing economic environment. So are there particular strategies around COVID-19 recovery that we should be thinking of and incorporating? To frame this as a set of questions may include the following questions. Basically, how can Culver City better leverage the growth of the creative economy? What steps should Culver City take to reduce the housing jobs imbalance and existing displacement and affordability concerns? How much residential growth does Culver City want, and where should it occur? How can the city support existing retail centers despite erosion and competition? And how can it actually grow additional retail and to remain competitive? Where and how should the city support further hotel development? And what kind of hotels? how does new development potential fit into the city's sustainability and equity goals? And finally, how can the city respond to COVID-19 impacts to become more just and resilient? I think there are particular stress points for this last issue as it relates to COVID-19 that the city will have to think about in terms of recovery, particularly to think about how unemployment and business closures may impact the city and who are the most in need of help. Growth in the real estate sector may slow, at least in the near term, due to reduced demand, but that should give us more time to prepare, as Culver City's fundamentals, we think, are still very strong. And last but not the least, how to shore up our fiscal resources, which are going to be compromised in the near term. We also think it is important to think of a recovery from the current economic situation in a manner that can make the city more resilient and is able to protect the most vulnerable. We typically have 3 phases of disaster recovery when we think about long-term recovery from shocks. The first phase is what we call an emergency response phase. This is the phase where your primary objective is to keep everyone safe. There's usually a lot of confusion during this phase due to the impact of the shock, mixed messages from various levels of government, public and private response, etc., but you have to get through it. The next phase is a stabilization phase, usually comprised of better coordination between agencies, identification of some funding sources, and emerging tactics and strategies for recovery put in place. This is where we are now, actually, between these 2 stages. The third phase is actually an adaptive recovery stage, where you put these strategies into action that you thought about in the stabilization phase and gradually move towards prosperity again. A fourth phase, which we added, is often ignored, which we call institutionalization. During a crisis, we see many problems in our cities that we did not see before in a new light, and this often leads to creative solutions to policy and resources in response to the recovery stage. And once we're out of the crisis, we tend to go back to our old ways. So we feel it is really important to think of ideas and strategies that we're thinking of now. Which one should we keep? Which one should be codified into the city's long-term strategy? So when we come out of this, we're in fact in a better position of community well-being than we were before. Kind of a just and resilient recovery, as we term it. Culver City really can think of using some of its inherent strengths towards this recovery and continuous prosperity. The city has really strong city services, it has locational advantages, a vibrant knowledge economy, and a number of redevelopment opportunities. And when we think of deploying these levers for economic development, we may want to prioritize a focus on vulnerable populations, increase access to amenities and services both physically and digitally, build community capacity to cope with shocks. Maybe even think of fiscal priorities with adequate resources for small and medium businesses. We will have less resources, but how do we prioritize those less resources and maybe not do it as business as usual will be critical. And then think of expanding the access to resources and tax base, and creatively think of infrastructure, all the way from open space and recreation to digital broadband access. These are just some ideas for you to start thinking about and mulling around to develop a longer term strategy. With that, I'm going to end my presentation. Thank you very much. And we hope to hear from you and your inputs as we go along. And we will continue to engage with you as stakeholders. And hopefully, as we come out of the current situation, we'll be able to engage more in person and share ideas and thoughts. But in the meantime, we expect to do that digitally and online and keep you posted of all the goings on. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching the City of Culver City's General Plan Update video series. For more information about the general plan update and opportunities to get involved, visit pictureculvercity.com. Thank you, and stay safe.